Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of Mind Over Masculinity, where we explore the stories, struggles, and strength behind redefining what it means to truly live a fulfilling life. I'm your host, Sana, and today's conversation is one that touches the heart on every level: physiological, emotional, and deeply spiritual. We're diving into the complex and deeply personal journey of healing cancer, not just on a cellular level, but also on the physiological level that impacts, on the psychological level that impacts how we experience the fight, the recovery, and the hope that carries us through. So, listeners, our guest today has a story rooted in both personal hardship and relentless curiosity. While pursuing his bachelor's degree, his world shifted when his father was diagnosed with aggressive cancer. And instead of staying the course, he immersed himself in understanding cancer at its most intricate cellular and molecular levels, uncovering life extending strategies that mainstream medicine it often overlooks. And this path didn't just change his father's outcome, it actually helped save lives. So, today he and his brother are on a mission to share those discoveries far and wide, giving hope and practical tools to families navigating one of life's greatest challenges. So, listeners, this conversation promises to be raw, real, and also potentially life changing. So, with that, meet my guest, Merlin Marquard. So, Merlin, welcome to the show, and I'm really, really honored to have you here with us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the very nice introduction. I would say very positive introduction as well.
Thank you, Merlin, and let's start with your pivot, the transformative moment in there. I mean, you made a massive pivot during your bachelor studies when your dad was diagnosed, and it can be such a life changing event, for families, for loved ones, and could be a paralyzing moment as well. So, what was going through your mind at the time, and how did you decide to dive so deeply into cancer research rather than just letting doctors handle it?
Um, I, so I mean, I was studying biotech when the news hit of the diagnosis. So I did already have some background in research and scientific literature, and especially also with the jargon and the language used in those papers. Um, but I think primarily it was a incapability on my part to accept that my dad was going to die. Um, when the news hit, uh, I didn't really process it at first. That took multiple weeks to happen. I my mother was immediately, in tears and very deeply hurt by the news and affected by the news. But both me and my brother, I don't know if it is a missing capacity to deal with those emotions, or whether it's just how we function. But we immediately went from just normal life to, okay, we need to solve this problem. So we just saw this as a problem that needs fixing. And obviously, if you if you want to fix a problem, you kind of need to get to know it. But to me, just accepting, fate, accepting course, or the course that our dad's life and ultimately death would take, was simply not an option. I don't know. I sometimes think that's because of some emotional immaturity, perhaps, of not being able or not willing to deal with those negative emotions. Um, but at the end of the day, I'm actually quite glad that I that I didn't have that maturity, maybe, because otherwise, I wouldn't have started looking into it. And perhaps our father wouldn't be with us anymore. And so that was kind of how it happened at the start. Our mother was devastated. My brother and I kind of, I don't think quite um received the news on an emotional level, but more on a kind of problem solver level. That's
Mhm.
generally, I think, how we handle negative emotions, my brother and I. And then we, dug into the cancer literature. And it had the result of me having to elongate my studies by a year, just simply because, I started truly just reading literature and reading on cancer, and not just scientific publications, but also alternative medicine publications, everything I could get my hands on around cancer. And, you know, just got lost in that and lost, I don't know how many, or invested, however you want to put it, how many hours into that. And yeah, that led
Yeah.
to,
And
you know, it
yeah,
became the
I
focus
can
of my
really
life.
imagine how overwhelming that must have been.
Yes. Yeah. Quite. Um, Especially to us as a family. I think that was I I don't know whether I truly, understood that at the time emotionally, but it was extremely stressful, and it was extremely overwhelming at the time.
Thank you for sharing that, Merlin, because um, I can imagine how overwhelming that must have been because um, most of us, we freeze in the face of uncertainty, but you and your brother, both of you leaned into it uh, from a perspective of problem solving, and that
Mhm.
says a lot about where your mindset was at that time, and that is something we can all. I think that's something to learn from. So that's really, really inspiring, Merlin. Um, and let's talk about cancer treatment. I mean, it can be focused on the physical surgery, chemo, radiation, but you have talked about how the psychological element is equally critical. And now that's
Yes.
something really curious to me. I mean, what are some of the biggest mental or emotional shifts you have seen impact recovery outcomes?
I think the I think one of the most damaging things to cancer outcomes is actually the loss of hope that patients face.
Mhm.
So this has been often shown in all kinds of diseases all across the board in, every culture around the world. If people lose hope and faith, they die sooner. Um, so it's just simply, I don't know, where that comes from, whether that's the soul, or whether that's just, a kind of psychosomatic phenomenon. But people live longer and live healthier lives if they believe that they can. So in that sense, it's, I think, pivotal in cancer care to encourage cancer patients to live on and to live a proper life, and not to live as cancer patients, but to live as humans. Um,
Mm.
and that's something that traditional medicine just doesn't go into, the whole mental psychological aspect. And obviously, on top of that comes the aspect of just the absolute stress that, you know, comes hand in hand with such a diagnosis, where you now think yourself doomed to die. And how do you deal with that even? It's not something most people are confronted with in their daily lives, right? Soldiers are maybe, but the broad public isn't confronted with the prospect of dying, in the
Mhm.
foreseeable future. And I think helping people deal with that and helping people nourish hope is extremely important. But I also think, with regards to what we do, is as kind of lifestyle intervention, so help people build a lifestyle that is conducive to healing cancer, having hope and having the mental aspect down and having that endurance and fortitude also helps with implementing positive changes that help on a physiological, biological level. So it's kind of, you have these two sides, where if you don't have the mental side down, the psychological side down, the spiritual side down of just having that faith and trust and willingness and hunger for life,
Mm.
it's going to be basically impossible to overcome it.
Yeah, that to me, it absolutely makes sense because more than of course the physical aspect is there, but our minds, they can either become an ally or an enemy in moments like these. Something many people underestimate.
Oh, very much so. Yes. I mean, I find it interesting that it's oftentimes, especially in traditional or in modern Western medicinal research, the power of the mind is oftentimes played down. But we still, if we have new treatments, we still test these new treatments against the so-called placebo effect, which is
Yeah.
literally just the power of the mind. So
Yeah.
we kind of have this, I don't know, a kind of professional schizophrenia, I guess, where we know that the mind is powerful, so we test against it, but we also completely discard the power of the mind. Uh, it just feels a bit silly to me sometimes.
That's a good one. And Malin, and this really interests a lot for me, that from all the research that you have done, what are some of the most surprising or under discussed discoveries about cancer treatment or prevention that you think every one of us should know?
I think the biggest takeaway from the emerging literature on cancer, which has become pretty much the mainstream in or has entered the mainstream in standard cancer research, is that cancer actually isn't a genetic disease, and that
Yeah.
is important because if it were a genetic disease, we couldn't change it. We couldn't really heal it. But as it is a a disease rooted primarily in metabolism and in dysfunctional metabolism, it's
Mhm.
it gets much more easy to access or to treat positively, because I mean, if your genes are gone and that's truly the cause, you can't really invert that. But if your metabolism is uh, skewed or dysfunctional, you can correct that. So I think that's the essential positive thing that is reflected in the emerging literature. And this is literature primarily from the last 5 years, last 10 years maybe, but it's very recent, which is also why it goes so overlooked in modern medicine.
That is interesting. That is very interesting because even I also have had the same impression that it's kind of genetic.
Mhm.
And like, if someone in my family, like especially in my immediate previous generation, if have had, then I'm at a greater probability of having it. But that is something really interesting, Merlin. And how do you actually you know why do you think these findings, they aren't more widely implemented in mainstream healthcare? Is it, I mean, is it about access or cost or maybe something deeper?
I think I think there's primarily two mechanisms there. I think one is just that these informations need time to propagate. They need time to kind of go from research to actual medicine. And that
Mhm.
takes, usually, depending on what it is, takes 20, 30, maybe even 40 years. Now, a counterexample where that isn't the case is if you have a big pharmaceutical corporation that pays for science to be made. Those results are generally adapted within years, and seldom it takes longer than a decade. So I think it's because it's not financed by any big corporations. So it's just, researchers doing it on research grant money and just for the curiosity of knowing what cancer is about and how to treat cancer. So there's no financial, there's no beneficiary who wants to promote it for financial gain. And I think that's why it takes so long. And then you just have, on top of that, you have the problem of information needing to travel and permeate a
Yeah.
culture, and it doesn't just instantly, get told around.
Yeah. Yeah. I think these reasons they are credible ones. They're even credible ones. That's kind of frustrating to hear, but it's also empowering because it means that we can definitely be proactive in seeking out this information ourselves, and that's what you did, you and your
Yes, 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 exactly.
oh, okay. And a bit of a not exactly, I would like to contradict, but just to make it more nuanced, like, some people might say, you are not a doctor, you shouldn't be guiding others in such a complex and dangerous field. So,
Mm.
uh, how do you respond to those who think you might be overstepping by interpreting signs for others?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question, Sana. Um,
Mhm.
I don't try to interpret science in as much as a doctor interprets findings and then makes a basically a medicinal choice for their patients. What we try to do is to look at the literature and then to just distill that down a um, into a understandable language to the average person. So we try to give people options, to give people the information that is found in literature, uh, more or less unchanged, apart from the complexity of the language. Um, that's what we primarily try to do, and also we don't tell people that they shouldn't do their normal medicine, uh, you know, runs or their normal medicinal treatments. What we do is primarily just a diet and lifestyle change with some, you know, additional kind of tips and tricks that just help with the healing. And
Yeah.
I don't think we're overstepping bounds because we're not really doing medicine. We're helping people with the other the other side of healing cancer. So there's also some things that we found in the literature that are more medicinal that we don't access and don't inform people of, because I don't think that's wise, because these things are perhaps more dangerous to do on your own. Um, so I would just say I'm not really overstepping bounds because I'm not doing medicine. Um, so a weight loss coach is also not overstepping his bounds, because he's not doing medicine.
Yeah. And then I think it's definitely a delicate balance. Um, I think the most obvious thing is that we are desperate for hope, but we also we have the right to have safe, credible information. And what I can feel, from what you have done and you are doing, is that the clarity here, that of course
Mhm.
there has to be clarity or transparency here, and that is so
Yes.
powerful in the food we consume, or the air we are breathing, the water we are drinking.
Mhm.
There has to be a clarity in there, and what you're consuming, it should be informed, so that we can make better decisions for ourselves and for our loved ones as well.
Yes, yes. And I also think it's not, we everyone basically knows, or it's at least assumed that everyone knows that what we eat and what we consume, the air, if it's fresh or if it's city air, that has a profound impact on our health. And to me, it's silly to suggest that it has only, impact on some part of our health, but not our entire health. That makes to me no sense. And cancer is part of our health, or I would say it's part of, unhealthiness. So, of course, what we consume has impact on cancer. That's only logical. And it's also reflected in the research quite drastically. So, yeah, I think there are things that people can do at home to improve chances, but I also think that there are new medicinal tools that are in research right now that we can't give to patients, but that hopefully, doctors can give to patients in a few years' time. Um, but you know, we truly don't want to get into medicine as of now.
Hmm. Hey, awesome. And Merlin, if our listeners they would like to further connect with you and explore more about the work that you're doing around healing cancer holistically, what would be the best way?
I think the best way would be to visit our website. We have also linked our socials at the bottom of it, so I think that's kind of the hub. That would be marchwood.com simply. And I would think that you just put that under the podcast episode. Uh, yeah, and then that's kind of you just connecting with us, seeing what we're doing, and looking at the data we're presenting. That's completely, open and transparent. We don't hide the information that we gather. We try to give it all away as much as possible, and well, of course, no surcharge. But then we're also building a community project for cancer patients who want or need help with their lifestyle, and also with the psychological aspects of it, of course. Um, and I think in that, the community aspect is very powerful to kind of struggle alongside other people who are facing the same demon, if you will.
Yeah, that is that is really inspiring, Merlin. I'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes
Mm.
for listeners for easy access. And you know what, Merlin, thank you. I really thank you for your honesty and for showing us what it looks like to actually challenge conventional thinking with both courage and then compassion as well. So it's really such a mindful way to approach, this demon that we call
Yeah,
as cancer. Thank you so
yeah.
much. Really
Thank
good.
you as well.
So, listeners, I believe this conversation today was so much more than just about cancer. It's a reminder of how intertwined, interconnected our bodies, minds, and spirits are. So, whether you have been directly touched by cancer or simply you want to live with more awareness, I hope you walk away with a renewed sense of agency over your health and healing. And if you found this episode valuable, please share it with someone who might need it. And do check out the show notes to connect with Merlin and check out his resources, his community. And as always, keep questioning, keep learning. And all I would say is healing is never one size fits all. Until then, this is Mind Over Masculinity, and I am your host, Sana. Thank you.